Good afternoon. We are now beginning a session on a cyber attack simulation on the financial system. And we need to understand that a cyber event in a financial system is not only a technological issue. This is mainly a business issue, reflecting the stability of the bank, the reputation of the bank, a variety of business aspects that can cause a damage to the whole structure, business structure and business capabilities and business functionality of the bank, of the financial system, not only in the bank, it can be any financial institution, or let alone any institution. But now we are dealing with a financial scenario. And because this is an overall business event, we decided to conduct a simulation and to have on our panel a group of people that is a mixture of technology, business, risk, so we can discuss a variety of issues not related only to the technological issues. As you will see in the simulation, we are mainly dealing with the business aspects of an event in the financial system. So I would like to present, first of all, my colleague panelists. So on my very right is Mr. Sheshadri, who is the Chief Security Officer of the Stock Exchange of India. I would just let you know that the Stock Exchange of India is one of the largest world stock exchanges globally, and they are very, very heavily invested in protecting their activity as a critical infrastructure of India. To his left, we have Advocate Ronique Favreau. She is a French advocate and also holds she's also a British UK advocate, lives in London. She is a former banker, and she has experience in the banking sector and also in mitigating crises related to that sector or any sector whatsoever. So Advocate Favreau will be presenting this business aspect. On my right again is Dr. Amir Schreiber, who is the Chief Cyber Security Manager of Bank Hapoalim. And this is, as I may explain, is the second line of defense in the or any organization, financial system. The first line is the technological or the human procedures or any procedures taken to mitigate cyber event. Dr. Amir Schreiber is in charge of the second line, who controls and makes sure that all the processes are in line and are within the risks that the bank is taking. And to my very right is my friend, Colonel Reserve Avner Ziv. Avner Ziv is the head of the technological division of the Bank of Israel. And within his capacity, he holds, of course, his responsibility for cyber security, but also a variety of issues, broader issues related to the stability of the overall IT system. Okay? My name is Gabi Siboni, and I'm a researcher at the Institute for National Security. On my left, you don't see her, but she's hiding, is Mr. Hadas Klein, who is a researcher at the INSS, also helping us develop this scenario and run this session for you. So this is for a start. I would suggest that we start with the first video, and then we will discuss. So as for you to understand how this session will be run, is we have a first scenario. We will discuss the scenario. Hadas will explain in 1 minute how we would like your participation in responding to this scenario. So we have a question for you. Hadas will relate to that. And once we discuss this issue, we will escalate the event with another video clip and then relate to that video clip as well. So please, Hadas, could you just explain how the participants are required to participate?
Okay, we will be using the same system as we used in a previous discussion. We will pop up questions for you, and you will answer with your mobile phones. I just want to highlight The code for the event code is INSS. No need to get into the Wi-Fi if you have 4G cellular. Only those of you who doesn't have 4G can get into the Wi-Fi and use the Wi-Fi to answer the poll. You don't supposed to do it now. We will instruct you when we wish you to answer a question, and this will be one question at a time. Thank you.
The questions relate to the scenario. So each one we present a question. We would ask you, please, to get into the web address that you have and please answer the poll. So we'll have both the view of the panel on those issues and your view as well. So please, we can start now with the video.
It was the call that Jeff had been dreading. Just as the VP of Operations for Gladwell Bank was finishing dinner, his phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was the IT guy. The IT guy never called him after hours. 20 minutes later, he was in the bank's technology center, watching the chaos unfold. The picture that emerged was catastrophic. It seems that highly professional hackers had broken through the bank's cyber defenses and stolen complete account data, personal identification, loan requests, transactional records, and even paperwork related to several high-profile corporate bankruptcy processes. As of yet, there were no reports on the data having been published, but Jeff knows it may be just a matter of time. And it gets worse. Jeff has now learned that aside from customer files, the bank's own audited reports, investments, and inter-office communications have been compromised. Extremely confidential information, valuable to any competing bank. Jeff watches dumbfounded as his IT department and business units simultaneously cast blame and try to assess the damage. It's time to plan the next tactical steps for crisis management, involving specific strategies for teams across the entire bank: IT, upper management, communications, and legal.
So as you can see, this is, it looks very serious. And this is a typical event that may happen in any organization, let alone a financial organization. And I would like to start with a brief understanding generally of a crisis management related to cyber from each of our panelists. So would you please, Mr. Sheshadri, start? Yes?
Yeah, good afternoon. Like I'm Sheshadri. I represent the National Stock Exchange of India. And thank you for getting me. I'll try my best. Okay, the scenario that you saw happens practically on a daily basis. Obviously, the management doesn't have to come on the IT floor every day, but it's a very common situation in most large enterprises. And we try not to make it worse. It's beyond a technological issue, like Gabi mentioned. Because technology people, there's a huge disconnect normally between technology and security. Technology can handle operations, security, understands security and a threat and a risk. But when it comes to mitigation, they have to go back to technology. And so between technology, risk, security, and senior management, it's an ongoing tussle. Who has to do what? And the challenges for a security team is visibility. You never know where the attacks are coming from, the intensity of the attacks, and what it is hitting, which target, which application, which server it's being targeting all the time. There's a huge challenge in terms of visibility. And the disconnect between tech and security is an added headache. And like most attacks in cyber, we can't attribute it to anybody. They come from all over the world. You don't know which country, which IP, which server is hitting what. It's an ongoing challenge all the time. And for it's a catch-up game.
One thing is in common to all organizations, that the IT and the other departments will fight and will blame each other during this kind of event.
So the security team sees one alert and they call up server team and say, see, I'm getting some traffic from this server. Can look into it. The server team sees into it. I think everything is normal. And we ask you, have you patched the server? Yeah, we patched it 3 months back and we have not seen anything after that. So, and they don't understand our perspective, and it's difficult for the security team to explain to them that traffic beyond a certain threshold can be malicious in nature and could lead to a lot bigger damage.
Thank you. Veronique, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. As a lawyer, what I can tell you is that in a situation of crisis, we will never be responsible. That's part of the job. There's no problem with that. So let's make sure we understand each other. And I think from my point of view, when I advise clients who are sitting on the board of directors of financial institutions, what I try to give them as a message is a crisis, and especially a cyber crisis, is not a question of if, it's a question of when. If they do not understand that, we have a very big problem. It's going to be hugely difficult to deal with the crisis when it arrives, especially if it has not been prepared at all. You may have seen yesterday in the Financial Times, there was an article related to the world of insurance and cyber security. And they report about a research which has been made in November 2018, so fairly recent, asking questions to UK financial institutions, asking them whether they would consider taking insurance for their cyber risk. 37% of the people who were asked the question replied that the risk was not big enough. It's a huge number, knowing that then the second biggest answer was 32% thought, okay, there might be a risk, but the price is too big. Which means that virtually 50% of the financial institutions in a country like the UK, where it is a hugely important market, consider the cyber risk as a secondary issue. That's the first crisis that we have to deal with, in my view.
Thank you, Vero. Thank you, Veronique. Amir.
Happy to be here, and probably now you are looking for a solution for this crisis because there is no responsibility, and the CIO, all of shoulders this crisis. So it should be said that this is not limited to a scope of the responsibility of the CIO or CISO, but it is an all readiness of the company. And one key of this solution to handle this kind of crisis is to be prepared as much as possible with a cyber risk management policy. The cyber risk management policy is a good position to be able to handle this kind of solutions, or to be somehow ready to handle this kind. First of all, we talked about the responsibility, so you have to define the responsibility. What is the responsibility of the board, of the senior management, of the CISO, of the business units? All have to come together to have a defined policy of who do what. Second is to adopt a cyber management methodology that can help handle this situation, and to think about the critical processes in the organization. This is a key element in the methodology. Another thing is to think about indicators. What can tell us, or what measures can we take that can tell us that something is going on, that something is coming. This is also a third point that is part of the policy. Another thing is to think about the supply chain, not only in the perimeter of the organization, but also of suppliers and their security and how it is related to our organizations. Another thing, and the last one, is to think about or define the risk appetite and the risk tolerance. If we have, or if we can handle and adopt or make our own policy with these 5 elements, so I think we will be in a better position.
Thank you, Amir. I just want to elaborate on the last point of Amir, the issue of risk appetite, because maybe you are not aware of this term. What it means that how much risk is the bank willing to take? Because if the bank doesn't want to have any risk, of course he can put all his computer underground, not connected to the internet, but he will not have any banking. So this is the tension between having business and how much risk you are willing to have while having business. So this is a very critical issue for any organization and a financial organization as well. Avner, please.
Thank you, Gabi, for having me. Well, the most probable thing that will happen in such an event is the organization will come into chaos and confusion, a lot of confusion. People will not know what's going on, what to do. It's a very embarrassing thing. And I think the most important thing to have at this time, at this kind of event, is first of all to have a plan. So you must have a plan, a clear plan in your drawer to pull out, a physical one, even better. And also a lot of leadership, because again, a lot of people will be in confusion. They don't know what's happening. A lot of people have a lot of ideas, throwing them to the air and going to different directions. So there must be a very clear leadership in such an event. And how to deal with this event, I think you have to have at least 3 programs to run parallel. First of all is the incident management, the very technical incident management of a cyber event. Second of them is the business continuity plan, which has to run separately from the incident management technical program, trying to put every possible process, every possible business process back into operations, even without technology, sometimes with manual interference and such. And the third plan is the PR plan, the PR management, because of course, especially for financial institutions, publicity or information that is handled not correctly may be very, very dangerous to the core existing of the organization, and it must be controlled very, very strictly. Or information flow inside the organization, and of course, information flow to outside of the organization. And these things have strange
interconnection. Yes.
Interconnection, yes, because it's enough sometimes that one employee tells its wife or his wife that something's happening in the bank, and then all the neighborhood knows, and then one journalist knows, and suddenly the PR or the spokesman of the bank receives a phone call from a journalist, and he has to deal with it. So it's very important to also, again, leadership inside the organization to make information flow in a controlled manner. About incident management, I think that most organization does not have sufficient internal capabilities to deal with a severe event. That's why I think the most important thing is to bring on the big guys, okay? But when you bring on the big guys, and I mean, it's usually from the government or intelligence, it depends on the country. It's very important to notice that when you bring on the big guys, sometimes they have a different agenda than the organization does. Okay, when they take over the event, sometimes they will want to make the fool of the forensics efforts, to understand who's the enemy, to understand what he's going to trying to accomplish. And what the organization wants to do is go back to business as usual. And it's usually contradicting efforts. So you have to pay attention to that.
Thank you, Avner. So I think to follow Avner's point is our first question is, who do you notify? You saw the event, who do you notify about the event? So let's go for the, continue, who? That's the English one. We have I go back. The question is, to who should we notify? Please if you can go into your devices and answer the questions, and we will begin discussing this issue now. So I would suggest that maybe Amir, you start. Amir, please, who would you recommend to notify, as we have now a crisis management team sitting? Who should we notify?
Okay, I think that it's a big question. I'm not talking about the regulator, or it's obvious.
יש לך את זה פה.
Yes, I'm not talking about the regular and other regulatories like the cyber authority, but to the customers, I think that the staff should be trained to handle this kind of situations. So what I mean is that there should be a task responsibility. For example, the business people should talk to the customers and define.
But the question is whether we tell the customers at this point. We are now only in the beginning of the crisis. We have learned that some information has been leaked. So should we go to customers and tell? As Avner said, when you tell one customer, you told the whole world. Yeah?
Yes, I think that it should be a committee in the crisis that should analyze this situation, its implications, and as you said, it could be worse if you doing an opposite PR to and it could be worse if you're not telling anything. So where is the bank? And it should be a committee that will analyze the situation, analyze the state. What is going on and what is going to happen. Not only what is now happening, what is going to happen.
Okay.
You can add a cyber situational awareness.
Okay. Avero, I know that you are a lawyer and you don't want to take any responsibility, but we need an answer from you, not the general options. So would you notify, and if you notify, to whom?
So first of all, you have to notify your regulator and the authorities. There is no question about that. You may know that, for example, in Europe now, under the GDPR rules, which is this new law related to the protection of data, you have 72 hours after the knowledge of an incident to let your regulator and the specific regulator for the data, which in the UK is the Information Commissioner. If you do not do that, the fines are huge. They are a percentage of your profits, and it is really very serious. So that is not an option. You have to go through that. In terms of customers, I would like just to take a step back to explain why my answer is you have to let your customers know, and all of them. You cannot choose the big ones, the smallest one, the biggest one. No, it's all the customers. The reason for that is that a crisis of this type is a kind of crisis in layers. So you have a technical crisis, you have a business crisis, you have, of course, the main, which is the security crisis, but you also have, at the very same time, a reputational and image crisis, which is developing at the same time in parallel to the incident in your institution. You have to deal with both. I think it's what Harry was saying when that's why you have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, it's going to be very difficult to get out of that. On the reputational and image crisis, you cannot take the risk that your clients learn of the incident by anyone else but you. So to me, it is important to let the clients know and to let them know as early as possible.
Thank you. Sheshadri, if you would to recommend the CEO of NSC, what would you recommend if such information has been leaked but not yet public?
Two things. If you're referring to this particular use case, then she's given the right answer. If you're referring to an exchange that we are managing, then the perspective is slightly different, because before you notify somebody, it's out in the market. So it's a stock exchange. It drops
down immediately.
It goes down for 30 seconds, the whole world comes to know. I don't have to report to anybody. So yes, yeah, obviously it goes to the CEO, the regulators. Customers know that it has been and impacted. But the challenge in a stock market, I don't work in a bank, so it's slightly different, is that if there is a downtime in a stock market in the application, it could be related to anything. It could be an application issue, it could be a hardware issue, it could be a cybersecurity issue. But these days, considering the season, everybody first says it's a cyber attack and then starts going backwards and telling whether it's a cyber attack or is it a hardware problem. So the analysis or the triage that we do has to happen in minutes. We have challenges there, but then such is a stock
Thank
market.
you. Thank you. Avner, well, you can look all behind us to see what the public was thinking. So you can see that most of them, about 65% suggested that we go to the law enforcement and the regulators, and only a fraction has recommended that we expose the event to clients, actual clients, and even some said just do nothing with notifying and just building your knowledge before you continue. Please, Avner, how would you take it from there?
Yes, I think you must operate every big player in this area. You don't have the sufficient capabilities to deal with a severe incident inside the organization. Most of the organization doesn't have the sufficient capabilities, so you have to operate the regulator and law enforcement of different kinds. Of course, the legal advice that we heard right now is important. So that means you have a very short time to understand and evaluate the situation and know how to communicate the things with responsibility to the public, to your clients, to everyone.
Yes, I want to give you a little live example of management of such a crisis. It was not the same crisis, but British Airways had last year, about 18 months ago or so, had an event of malfunctioning of their own systems, and they could not fly for 32 hours, and about 75,000 people did not fly for 1.5 days. But the issue was not the actual malfunctioning of the company, of British Airways, but rather the issue was how the management reflected the event to its customers, to its shareholders, to the public. And there was the big, after post-mortem of this event, so we had 18 months of understanding this event, there was the big issue of how the management is reflecting a cyber event, an IT event, to the public, and let's say the temptation is to provide immediate answers, and once you provide immediate answers, you should be aware that they are not true all the time, and immediately you find the right answer, and the public is very unforgiving for such an event, so they were for British Airways. So we would go to the next question, please. Can we, it's here. Okay. In the event that customers' data is being compromised, so we know that the data is out there. Before, we didn't know that the information was out there. We only know that it was stolen from us. But now we know that there are clients, we know their names. There are clients that have information, critical information, like financial reports, like balance sheets of their accounts, and they can be very big clients of a bank. We know that this information is in the hands of someone else, a third party, and it may be used. So what do we do then? So I would like the team to reflect. So you want to start, Avner? יש תשובות, אתה רוצה לראות אותם? Okay. We don't have to go through please, you can begin filling the answers to these questions, but we don't, at the panel, okay. We don't have to go directly with those answers.
Okay,
we can be broader.
We don't stick to the answers. Okay. Yeah. So again, I think first of all, you cannot hold away, you cannot hold back information from your customers, but still you have to be, when you give the information, you have to be very accurate, and you don't want to make misconfusion, which is not needed. So it's a delicate balance between how much time do you need to understand, or you think you understand, the most of the extent of the event, and between that and between how quickly do you go to to your customers and give them the information. So you have to find the right balance. I guess it's different for every different event, but then you have to be sure that you know what you say.
Okay, for Veronique, I think your answer, you answered that before. You said go immediately. So you don't need to know whether it has been compromised. You just want to say immediately before.
I think that from the moment you know you have been the target of an attack and that the attack was successful, you should say so. In terms of data which have been leaked, I think that it should also be said immediately to clients. Where I completely agree is that, of course, the difficulty in this kind of situation is that you don't want to say anything wrong because, as Gabi was saying, the example of BAs is really, for them, terrible, and in terms of reputation, disastrous, because they gave an explanation which didn't make any sense whatsoever.
It didn't work on you. You flew BA.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But the problem is that you're right. You have to find the right balance of what you're going to say. But it is better to tell your client immediately that his data is compromised and is in the hands of a third party than to say nothing. Now, that being said, it would be worse to say the data is compromised, it is in the hands of a third party, and that's the reason why, and this is what happened, if you don't know yet. Even if your explanation is short, it is, to me, it is better than nothing. You cannot hide the information. I'm going to tell you what I say to every single one of my clients, whether on the boards of directors of financial institutions or any other client. I tell them that nowadays, confidentiality does not exist anymore. It will leak. There is no doubt. So you have to be proactive. You have to be the one telling your clients. If it goes to the client through the press, through the social media, it's a disaster for you. So my answer is...
Thank you, Favreau. You can see the answers of the audience. We have about 130 people answering, which I think there are more here. So please connect and provide your input as well. So 130 is very much, but just we need more input from any of you. Sheshadri, related to this dilemma, I think also the stock exchange is holding valuable confidential client information or traders' information. And regardless of the issue of the trade itself, so if such information is leaked, how would you recommend to deal with this leak?
Simple. It is immediate and be brutally honest. There's nothing to cover there. It happens. And we all do our best. Nobody does it intentionally. And we can't cover everything all the time.
Okay. Amir, any input?
I think that here is a more accurate, I suppose it is more accurate customers and specific that you have immediately to address them, but let the right people do it. The trained people, not the IT people, yes?
Yeah, you're right, because sometimes it's not, when you say notify, you don't mean that you go to the radio and to the television and say, let's notify. You pick up the phone and you call client by client, if the client is important, and you give him a personal brief, and sometimes it will be the head of a division, and some it will be the CEO of the bank that will do it to a certain client. They tell him, okay, your information is out, we are trying to deal with that and to manage that, okay? We go to the third question. So what should be the first decision in such a scenario that we've seen? The first decision of the bank's management as a whole. Notifying we just discussed it, but there are other decisions to be taken care of. We just gave an option of answers. Okay? Please. You're reading? Vero, you can see in the back the answers. You have them, okay.
For me, the solution cannot be to just shut down your business. For exactly the same reasons that I was explaining earlier. You have this crisis which is in further layers, and if you shut down your business, you increase immediately the impact of reputation. It means the image that you give is the image of a business which cannot deal with one of the major identified risks that it is supposed to have dealt with. And we come back to the point which was made earlier that you need to have a plan. If your plan is properly done, you should not have to disconnect and go underground to cover your back. You have to be able to continue running the business as much as you can and to continue serving your clients, because in the end, if you do not want that crisis to become your death, you have to continue the business and deal with the crisis, and everything goes in parallel. So for me, you do not disconnect anything at all.
I just want to raise a point that is, Avner mentioned it, it's very typical to Israel. It might not be related to other countries. The issue of the threats, sometimes a financial event is caused by a state or a state-supported attacker. It's not only crime. This kind of event may be generated by a political motivation. So in that case, you would see either you ask them, or you would see that the government institution will come and tell you, we would like to have access to your computer, and we don't want you to disconnect, as you mentioned. We don't want you to disconnect. Don't even disconnect the affected computers only, but let them be live while you are bleeding, of course, as a bank. You are bleeding at the same time, because they want to make a complete investigation of and go and find who is behind this attack. So this is the dilemma in Israel. In other countries, it may not be the case. We are a small country. Everybody's connected to everybody. So you would see immediately that the security organization may be involved in such an event. Avner, you want to relate to that, please?
Yeah, well, I think disconnecting the systems completely makes no sense. Not for anyone, actually. Not for the forensics or the immediate response teams that will come and check this event, not for the business continuity of the bank, not for anyone. So what's the right thing to do is, I believe it's answer D, which pull out the business continuity plan and start acting by it. Having said that, still, if you have some way of isolating, yes, thank you very much for the crowd. Isolating some of your critical systems without stopping the important business processes of the organization, and again with coordination with the incident response team, then I think it's advisable to do so. And you also need to have a plan for that as well, because when you are in stress, it takes time to understand whether cutting off this line will affect a business process or not. So you want to have a contingency plan like that.
So you see that most of our audience believes that to just take the plan out, but this is presumably we believe that we have a plan. Or if we have a plan, it's a reasonable plan, because we have seen such plans, and sometimes they are very nice drafted and with chromo paper, but has no value in an incident. So it's a nice answer to have, but sometimes it doesn't have any value to actually in a crisis. Please, Amir.
I think that it's very dependent on this in the situation. I agree that here stopping. I don't know what input it will make, but I think that from the point of view of risk management, you have to think, of course it's a business decision overall, but you have to think about the potential losses, or if you can stop the losses, if you are disconnecting these servers.
But it's different when you, what are losses? Yeah, but when you say losses, what are losses? So sometimes losses are money stolen from
Yes.
or information stolen, but other losses
So
are
here-
reputational losses, and you cannot.
So this is, I think, in general situation, but here I don't see the point. Maybe if the security people say that the attack will be, we haven't seen it all, or there is other things that, or other input that we receive from the IT, maybe there is a sense, but only for this situation, I don't see the point.
Sheshadri, please.
I think these are very simple options. Depending on the situation and the impact and the exposure, our options are many more. And what we can do is, again, on the ground, with the situation, we can open a few things, close a few things, move to the DR. And if the data has gone off the bank to the hackers, there's nothing much is going to do onto the bank immediately. I mean, if you have lost the passwords, then the impact is different. If it's just PII data, the impact is different. Doesn't mean that we have to switch or close or shut on that. So it all depends on what is gone out and what is the exposure.
Thank you. So I think we understood now that the environment of this event, as you know, the attackers do not come only to steal information sometimes, but if they have access to the critical system, they want to maybe to do other things. And let's see what happens next with our scenario. Can we run the scenario, please?
It's 3 months later, and Jeff finally senses that the storm is over. He's done with damage control. The security holes are patched, and cyber experts have added enough new defenses to give the bank some peace. Or so he thinks. When the bankers arrive at their desks Monday morning, they discover clear trails of dozens of unauthorized SWIFT transfers made to accounts scattered across the globe. The total comes to just over $330 million. While the IT department, the bank's lawyers, and law enforcement scramble to track and recover the funds, the details of the attack have been leaked to the public. Dozens of local and international media outlets share verbatim an announcement sent to them by the faithful global organization. We, the trustees of the globe, have hit Gladwell Bank today as yet another demonstration of our ability to do what we will with the global financial system. Today, it's Gladwell's turn as a key player in the elitist, corrupt banking system. By the end of the day, rumors and accusations have taken over social media, while mainstream media now appear to have gained access to a collection of leaked internal correspondence between some of the bank's senior officials. The embarrassing material includes angry, irresponsible slander about management's lack of professionalism, confidential aspects of the attack, and debate about the way the crisis was handled with the press. Naturally, this leak triggers a wave of investment withdrawal requests. Foreign clients begin expressing a loss in confidence and trust in the banking system and make no secret of their search for alternative investment opportunities. Just when Jeff thought it couldn't get worse, he learns that the entire sector will soon share his fate. Cybersecurity experts now tell reporters that they've found evidence that the attackers leveraged holes in the software of one of the bank's critical contractors, and that this same contractor provides services to a large percentage of the banking industry. A scenario like this could end in devastating damage to the entire banking industry, potentially harming the country's financial stability.
Okay, I would like to start with the last point of supply chain. Very romantic. With the supply chain issue. The supply chain is a very critical issue with the financial system, as can be seen here, and I would like to have your opinion on the supply chain issue before we go to the questions related to how would you suggest or how would you recommend dealing with the issue of supply chains in general, where you have critical suppliers that supply services to all the banks. This is the current situation in Israel and globally. There are suppliers, the same suppliers provide critical information, and if an attacker goes through one of this kind of critical suppliers, he may gain access to all the financial system in Israel. And maybe, Avner, this is not your responsibility as the Bank of Israel, but the regulatory responsibility of the financial system. You may represent them.
Yeah. Well, suppliers of core banking software is quite an exclusive club. There are not a lot of players in it, and that's why most of the banks around use a lot of the same software. Having a clear policy how to deal with such suppliers is very important. Has become more important over the last years, and I think it's very important that the procurement processes in the organization will have the needed legal steps and requirements to deal with such issues when you sign the contract with a third party.
Okay, thank you. Anyone on the supply chain?
Yes, as part of the people that you have to inform of the attack, and of course, depending on how long it takes you to identify the exact nature of the attack, I think that letting the critical supplier know is also something which is key, because it has to be a team work. Once you have informed the supplier, if there is an issue with their software, the system that they provide, they can at least contact their own clients, so your competitors, but basically you're going to help your competitors, but that's also where the resilience of the financial market should come from. It comes from the collaboration of the overall market on that kind of issues. So the supplier will then be able to go back to his own clients and to say, we know that there is a backdoor to this system, we are working on it, and we're going to fix it. If you do not let them know quickly, then there is a risk that your next door neighbor will be the next bank which is attacked. So I think that's another...
Thank you. Amir?
I wanted to say that in the old days, the security was in our perimeter, the organization perimeter, and it's way not nowadays. When you have the cloud and the digital and other suppliers, you have to think about the security of the whole chain, not only the organization, and there is also regulation of Bank Israel 363.
The National Bank of Israel.
Yes. National Bank of Israel.
Yeah, related to supply chain. Sheshadri, please. You are heavily involved in supply chain. You have a lot of suppliers.
Yeah, most of our stuff runs on the other equipment. If you're not the first person who's impacted, then you can do a lot of things. It's the first company which gets impacted pays for the damage heavily. The second, third, fourth, fifth, there are always, you come to know of it, there are alternatives to work around, fix, reduce the impact. So just pray that you are not the first person that gets hit.
Okay. I just want to let you know that in the currency of Bank Hapoalim, we've been asked, the INSS have been asked to recommend for a model of managing the supply chain risk for the financial system in Israel, and we have provided such a document. Hopefully it will be adopted by the financial institution in Israel, and they will create a central ability to manage supply chain because, as I just mentioned, there are many suppliers which are common to the financial institutions in Israel. So where we go back to our issue, and we ask questions about what would be the influence of media with in general, or in our scenario, as we see in the event is out there public, what will be the influence and the effect of media in such an event? So you are required, please, to answer the questions in your devices. And would the panel please relate to this issue? Sheshadri, let's start with you.
Huge. For us, it's catastrophic for a bank.
So we commit suicide from the top floor of NSC, yeah?
Well, NSC is...
We can take anything high enough, huh?
It is catastrophic, and I don't know, I can't state anything less than that.
It's catastrophic, yeah.
Yes.
So how would you recommend your management to deal with that, with this catastrophic?
One is obviously we have prepared to address most of the attacks and the crisis to a large extent. I can't foolproof that system. But whatever happens, we live through it. There's nothing much you can do. Frankly, you just live through it for a day or 2 days and then recover from that. You just can't avoid everything.
Yes, Veronique?
In my view, the work that you have to do with the media is very often just a question of limitation of damage and basically do your best. It's what I was telling you earlier. There is no more confidentiality. So if you have not been proactive and you have not yourself told the media what was happening and that you've been hit, they will know and then they will crucify you. So it is really important that you try to remain in control of the process. That is definitely part of the plan which should exist and should be efficient. But if the media takes hold of the story before you have put it in their hand, the damage to your reputation is huge.
Avner?
Well, I think in Israel, the control over the communication is more strict than in other countries for different reasons. That's why in former events of cyber attacks, we have succeeded to make the communication more responsible than in other places, even if we didn't immediately release the information to the public. Gladfully, there hasn't been a lot of incidents like that, but in cases like that, usually, if you can control the communication using censorship or other mechanisms, it's very advisable.
Yeah, but censorship is only for security-related issue, but this is a commercial issue. So.
Not only.
But the commercial issue, would you, as the regulator, would recommend using censorship in the reports of a commercial event in a bank?
Well, I cannot elaborate on that too much, but I would advise checking if you can do that, yes.
Okay. Amir?
I think that what is important in this situation is that the spokesmen and the people that has to know how to do this job will do their job, and the IT people must continue to mitigate, identify, and handle this situation. It's very hard because there is a lot of pressure inside and outside, and the task is to make sure that the situation is technically
absolutely. In such an event, you would see that the management is pushing the technological system to provide answers where they don't have the answers. And to just get a little bit space from the pressure, they would provide an answer, which is not correct. And the management will go immediately and report that to the stakeholders, or to the press, whoever it may be. And that is also responsibility of the management, not to press too much the technological system, the technological people, and let them, if you ask a question, they will have to give you an answer, and it's very difficult. It cannot be true all the time. I just want to elaborate on one thing related to this PR issue. When a bank has an incident and they want to send someone to delegate, to present, as it was in British Airways event, either the CEO or someone else, if this person does not have a previous credit with the press, and if this is the first time people see him on television or on media, and thinks that because of his position, people will believe him, this is not the case. If you want to have your mitigation plan, and you think that someone should represent your situation in a crisis, you better beforehand build the trust of your clients and of your let's say, of the people that are the stakeholders in forehand, so you expose him to public before the crisis, and not wait for the crisis to say this is the IT manager, he will give you the answer. It will help no one. So please, let's go to, no, I'm going back. That goes to my point. Who should represent the bank in such a crisis to the media? Who should be the person to do that? So let's, the answers. Please respond to the answers. To this one? Okay, so can we see the answers? Hadas? You are advanced. You are more advanced than us, so we didn't discuss that yet, huh? Can we see the answers, please? Well, let's begin discussing us. Okay, so who should represent the organization? So I see that almost 70% went for the CEO, the poor CEO. He goes to the public, and let's see what he's worth. Veronique, you want to start? Please.
I completely agree with you. I think it has to be either the highest executive or the chairman of the board. There is no other choice because the issue is beyond technical. If you send someone with an IT background, for example, they might be absolutely able to explain some of the technical issues, although we have seen that these issues evolve. But they might not be absolutely ready in terms of general presentation of the bank, making sure that damage is limited. So in my view, only the highest level can go out and announce and explain what's happening and how the bank is reacting.
Yes, please. Sheshadri, your CEO, you would send your CEO to the battlefield, huh?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. As long as it's not you. Yes.
I'll never be the CEO.
Yes. Amir?
I think a CEO or the best person to say to go through the public to make a trusted statement.
Okay. Avner?
Yes, as I said before, this is the time to show leadership, and that's why the CEO should step forward and speak his thing.
So let me be a little bit advocate, the devil's advocate, and tell you that sometimes the CEO is very good in CEOing, but is poor on his communication ability. He may be a very good financial leader, but is very poor in his ability to delegate information to the public or to any stakeholder. So in which case, I would recommend any financial institution to sit and decide who is the person in beforehand. This is part of the business continuity plan, yes? To decide who is the person that we want to represent our position in times of crisis, and then to expose this person and to provide credit for this person in the public beforehand. So constantly this person should be engaged with the public, so if something happens, people know the face. They can identify with the face and have some credibility with the person. And just going with the CEO as the CEO might be also a devastating result, yes? We say in Golani, we say that if you want to kill your CEO, do exactly what he told you to do, okay? So exactly, but if he says you go right, go right. That will kill the CEO immediately. And that's the same case with cyber event, yes? So we go to the next question. If you were the CEO of a competing bank, what would you do? Okay? Who wants to be the first victim?
Yes, I think that...
you are always...
Yeah, I have no responsibility, so I can talk. There's no problem. You do not criticize the next door bank or financial institution, because the day it's going to happen to you, you're going to be in real trouble, and everybody will remind you at that time what you have said. I think that if you decide to make any communication at all, you should certainly say that you take the event seriously, that you are working to learn the lessons of what is happening to your friends and competitors, and that you have a plan. Now, I would not go towards saying that you have a perfect plan or that it will not happen in your house, because you might well look ridiculous one of these days.
Sheshadri, please.
No, I just tell my IT team that ensure that it doesn't happen here.
Yes, Amir.
I think the same as she told.
Okay. Avner, you also think the same?
Yeah, of course. I wouldn't argue with a lawyer. So, well, anyway, I wouldn't.
I make a living arguing with a lawyer. You should know.
I would definitely not end up my relationship with the supplier. And again, we are in a supply chain event. Since maybe he's one of the core assets I have in solving this incident. And I think
it might be Microsoft. And there is no way you can end the relations with Microsoft.
It might be Microsoft, it might be Swift, if we remember
Yes.
one of the most famous events in supply chain manners was Swift with Bangladesh event and others. And I think those events led to suppliers understanding their responsibility differently. I think Swift went over a very severe change in the way they look at their clients and their responsibilities in their clients' implementations. And a lot has to be learned from that event.
Yes, thank you. So we are getting to the end of our panel. So I would appreciate if each one of you would provide some concluding remarks before we close this panel, please. Sheshadri?
Okay. Lastly, I think in terms of crisis, the only thing that people look up to you is for trust. I don't think there'll be a flight of customers or money going out if you can establish trust with your customers. And that can come best from the CEO directly. And the second factor is how fast you bring your services back up. The first objective of that in a crisis should be in minutes let the service back be up and online. That establishes a big connect with the customers, and whatever is the background, forensics, impact, regulation, if you get the services up and running, people are with you.
Thank you. Ronique, please.
I think that we are all in agreement that planning is absolutely key, and you cannot avoid a good plan because that may well save your organization. More generally, I would like to tell you that beginning of September 2018, British Airways, them again, announced that their website had been hit and that they only realized on the 7th of September that hackers had been in their system since the 21st of August. So for 2 weeks, they were completely blind to what was happening on their website. The link with what we are talking about today is that the hackers were only interested in the details, financial details and personal details of the clients of BA. And the hackers stole a little bit more than 385,000 bank details and credit card numbers from clients, which means that we talk today on this panel particularly of the financial sector, but the fact is that nowadays every time we provide our bank details or credit or debit card numbers to a supplier, be it BA, Amazon or any kind, we in fact take a risk, us as customers, and every single one of these entities take a risk because they hold our data, and every time a hacker can steal that kind of number of details, they put the financial system at risk.
Thank you, Vero. Amir, half a minute?
I think that the best lesson here is don't say it won't happen to my organization. Think as it will happen, and you have to have a good plan, or that you think that it's a good plan that will help you when a crisis like this happens. And think not only about your organization, about your supplier. Train your people, the appropriate people to handle this kind of situation. So you would be in a better position as you think on risk management.
Thank you. Avner?
As we say, only paranoid survive, and I think the most advisable way to live in this area is to assume that there is a cyber event right now happening in your organization. You just haven't found it yet. And having said that, you should wake up every morning and look for it and assume it's there, then you didn't find it yet, and that's it.
Thank you. So I would just conclude by, we are talking about plans, and I don't want to mislead by who made this quote. It's not mine, but the plan is nothing. Planning is everything. It means that while your planning process, you learn a lot about your organization, and the actual plan that you made will not be relevant to a concrete circumstances. You always have to make adaptation to your plan while in a crisis. So having said that, I will thank you everybody very much, and I will thank the panelists as well, and a lot of applause. Encore. Thank you.